Minimize.
Oh, you want to go?
I'm about to do that.
Yep. So, welcome to TechAtAgoda, guys. We've got Daniel here from GitHub who's going to give us a run through on some of the GitHub features today. So, yeah, welcome, and I'll hand over to Daniel.
Busy day at work?
Busy day.
Good day at work? Tired? I'm tired. So my name is Daniel. I'm the Director of Solutions Engineering for GitHub for APAC. I'm based out of, well, somewhere near Sydney. And Charles just asked me along tonight because what we want to do, and I probably should do a quick survey. Who knows GitHub? Has anyone used GitHub? Has anyone been using it for years? So everybody's quite familiar with GitHub. No, not everybody, that's kind of good. So the people that know GitHub are sitting here, and the people I need to talk to are actually sitting here. Alright, that's going to be awesome, that's going to be fun. Alright, look, I apologise if I don't look at you during the night, because I'll be looking here, but I promise I'm thinking about you. That also means that if you have a question, and I'm not looking at you and you've got your hands raised, please say something. Alright, so I can hear you and hopefully I can answer your question. So like I said, just ask me along tonight just to go over some of the features of GitHub. If you already know how to use GitHub, you might have seen all of this, and if that's the case and that you get nothing out of tonight, I'm really sorry. But come and see me afterwards and at least say hi, and so that I can say, hey, appreciate you using GitHub. For those of you who don't know GitHub, you may learn a few things tonight. But then even if you do know GitHub, there's a couple of things that aren't immediately obvious that might help you that we'll go through. And if you get one thing out of it, then I'll kind of be really happy. So I probably should talk about what we're going to cover tonight. And I'll do that not in our PowerPoint presentation. And we'll have a look at what we want to talk about tonight. So here's our workshop agenda that we're going to do tonight. I can't guarantee that we're going to get through all of this, especially given that I only have now an hour and a half before pizza. And but this is basically mirrors something I presented this morning for Agoda themselves. So I know, put your hands up if you actually work for Agoda and you're here. No, you two guys, because I remember seeing it this afternoon. I'm not sure about you, if you was. If you were at my session this morning about GitHub, this might look familiar because you're about to sit through it exactly again. The conversation may come up, and that's okay. And you might have thought about something this morning that now triggers a question, so feel free to ask that question. So we're going to go through what we call the GitHub flow. The GitHub flow is what we actually use at GitHub to build and deploy software. Some of you may have heard of it, some of it may not. We're going to use an example repository that I've created that's very empty. It doesn't actually have any source code in it, because my job tonight is not to teach you how to code. So I haven't created a complex application or anything like that, because I tend to find that when I do that, people are trying to figure out what the code does and not exactly what I'm trying to show there. The repository, we'll go through the flow. So we'll branch, we'll commit some code, text files. We'll open a pull request, right? And the pull request is where we start discussing why we've made our changes and making sure that everybody agrees. Maybe go through a code review process, and then once everybody's agreed that that's the changes we want to make, we will then basically merge that into our master branch. So that's some of the things we'll do tonight. We're going to look at projects. Projects are something that are relatively new to GitHub. We've had it in github.com for quite some time, nearly a year now, and we also now have it in our GitHub on-premise version, Github Enterprise. So I'm going to show you projects. If you're familiar with a product like Trello, for example, you'll see a lot of familiarity with that. The goal is not to replace something like Trello. If you like using Trello, please keep using Trello. It's a fantastic product. But in other cases, maybe just some kind of lightweight project that you need to do to track a couple of issues or pull requests that are going on might come in handy. We'll have a look at that. We're going to look at code review. Code review is also something that we've introduced recently into GitHub. That means that you can make sure that you cannot merge to the master branch until somebody's actually looked at the code and clicked on the button, say, I approve that we can merge this, and go ahead. We might skip being social because we'll probably run out of time. I definitely do want to function on mastering search. A lot of people just type something like readme into the search field and then they dig through all the results, but I want to have a quick look at how you can build complex search queries just using some qualifiers directly in the same search bar, but really focus down on the kinds of things that you're looking for. Again, if we get time, we'll have a look at mastering wikis. And mastering Markdown. I might bring mastering Markdown a little bit forward because this is some of the coolest stuff that's actually part of GitHub that allows you to collaborate with people. It's not just about making text bold. It's doing things like, how can we automatically close an issue when we actually merge a pull request? You know, you can actually do that just by some special Markdown. It's pretty cool. And we'll go through and have a look at that. And somebody's eyes over there who says they've used GitHub for a while just lit up. All right, so I've helped one person. We might have a look at Webflow. With Webflow, we're going to look a little bit more about the administration of your repository. How can you make it so that people can't just push code into the master branch, that you give them some things that they have to achieve, you know, like again, get that code approved, maybe make sure that it doesn't, you know, there's no conflicts with the master branch and so forth. We'll take a few things from there as we go. So any questions on that before we get kicked off? Before we kick off? Oh, okay, cool. Alright. So like I said, my name is Daniel Figusio. I'm the Director of Solutions Engineering for APAC at GitHub. I live in the Blue Mountains, which is about 100 kilometres west of Sydney, 60 miles. I keep having to switch back and forth between American and the rest of the world. And so I live 100 kilometres west of Sydney, so that's my house covered in snow. That was 1 year on one day that was covered in snow. The next year on exactly the same day I was fighting bushfires about a kilometre away and it was nearly 40 degrees Celsius. Same day, just a different year. So I really weird weather where I live. So there's a view from somewhere about a 5-minute drive from where I live up in the Blue Mountains. But I'm a mountains person, but I also love the beach. So here's me on Christmas Day, down on River Beach in Sydney, with a couple of friends and some family. This here is my favourite GitHub sticker, the kimono to cat. And I think, Joel, we've got some stickers to share around later on because I see an awful lack of stickers on everyone's laptops and we need to fix that. Okay, so that's the kimono to cat. She's my favourite GitHub sticker. I love her. She's dressed in purple. That's my favourite colour. This is my favourite video game. Does anyone have a guess as to what that might be? Destiny? Ooh, no. It's a good guess though. I did play Destiny for a while. I haven't played Destiny 2. That's a game that caused a lot of problems when it was released. It's called No Man's Sky. When No Man's Sky came out, a lot of people said this is not the game we wanted. We wanted something really complex. We wanted something like, Elite Dangerous. I love Elite Dangerous. I think it's a really good game. No Man's Sky is my favourite game, and to be honest, if No Man's Sky had some of the gameplay of Elite Dangerous, it would be the best game ever. Guess what? It now does. You have new missions. You can do all kinds of things in No Man's Sky that was never available before. And so now it's kind of a hard choice for me between No Man's Sky and Elite Dangerous, but I think No Man's Sky kind of wins it. So that's enough about me, and I'll find out more about you later on if you want to come and have a chat over pizza. But we're going to talk about now the GitHub flow. The GitHub flow is what we use at GitHub to deploy software. It's a very simple process. Alright. Don't have a sales pitch along the top. I just pulled this out of a presentation I normally present to, banks and organizations like that. But the idea being is that we have our master branch here along the bottom, that kind of bottom grayish line that changes color. And that is the code that we don't want to change until we know we want that code to be ready and be in production. So obviously we make sure that people aren't making some changes to that code directly, but I have an idea for a new feature for my product, or I've read an article somewhere about how I can, make my search engine run faster just by, creating, implementing a new algorithm or something like that. So instead of actually doing this on the master branch and potentially corrupting the service I've already got in play, I create a branch. And by creating a branch, I'm basically making a copy of the code that I can work on individually and then work at my own pace, my own time, make mistakes, that's fine, everybody makes mistakes. And then when I'm ready to actually discuss some of those changes that I've made with everybody else and get approval, I have what's called a pull request. A pull request is when you're basically saying, hey, I've made a copy of the code, and I've made a couple of changes, and I want to discuss that with you and get approval to deploy it. Now, a lot of people who use GitHub probably request when they're probably around 75 to 80% of the way through writing their code. Even in some cases 90% of the way through writing their code. And I wonder why when somebody comes back to them and they say, hey, did you think about this particular facet? Or did you think about, this algorithm which may actually make the search engine run a little faster? And what happens is you go back and you rewrite your code and spend an awful lot of time doing it just to bring in some of the changes that people have suggested you made. We actually suggest that you open a pull request really early. So when you get an idea for a new feature or you want to make a change, make your branch, make a couple of changes and then open the pull request straight away. Because at that point in time, you're just starting to discuss it with all your colleagues, and all your colleagues have got valuable input into the work that you do. You're not working on anything alone, especially if you work for a larger company like Agoda, where there's a whole bunch of people that you work with who may know some things that can help you. So we tend to find that successful projects, they tend to let less bugs get into production. They tend to fix things a lot quicker. They tend to have to not rewrite code as often if they open that pull request earlier in the conversational process. The other good thing about opening the pull request is if you're integrating with tools such as continuous integration environments, they can come in and run all the unit tests for you, and then they can report back into the system, and they can do things that they can stop code from being merged until all those tests have passed. Once you've had those conversations and everybody agrees that this is the code that you want to ship, it's at that point in time, and the test passed and everything is green, it's at that point in time that you then merge into your master branch and then you deploy out. And that sounds pretty simple. You may wonder why I'm talking about this. Who here runs a website? Do you run a website, web application, like say, I don't know, Agoda? What kind of web application is it? Yeah, because you got your hand up.
Oh, it's like a personal project for mapping flight routes.
Okay. And do you share others? It's a personal project, but obviously the world looks at it, like you've got people who come to your site and look at it and things like that?
Yeah, it's like a few people per day.
A few people per day. That's cool, fair enough. Does anyone else do it on a commercial basis, at a larger scale basis? Do you want to describe it? I'm not putting your site down, sorry, I'm going to get to that in a second. What kind of site do you work with?
We have a B2B food delivery platform for restaurants.
Yep.
So it has a front end as well as a back end.
Mm-hmm.
And what happens is that there's a core version, but there's a new client. Every time there's a new client, they tend to ask for little modifications here and there, which get kind of passed out from the core version.
Sure.
So here is one of the things we use to kind of branch out the core functionality and then what we should apply on top of it.
And do you use a workflow similar to that, something along those lines? Very simple.
Not so much. The thing is, we were on Microsoft's tool for code versioning and all, and one of our clients, one of our clients asked us to use Git. And that's how we literally moved all over to Git, because we just wanted to be at one place instead of being at two places. And
that's why Microsoft has done the same thing.
The workflow tool is not so much that we're using right now. One of the things I'm here to do to kind of figure out how to use it more effectively.
Yeah.
Because over time, what has happened is that as changes go from the core version to the one that we're applying to, it's always not nicely automated. It does tend to happen at times that we're forced to kind of move things manually around. And
Sure.
It becomes messy at some time.
Yeah, no problem. I kind of get that. How many releases a day would you say you do on your website?
Today, about 0.
0 a day? 0 a week? Yeah. Just whenever you can?
Yeah.
Okay, fair enough. How many releases a day do you do on your website?
Can I answer per month, maybe?
Yeah, answer per month. How many times do you change your website per month?
Maybe 4 or 5 times.
4 or 5 times a month, okay, cool. So GitHub, we have 23 million users. We have about 5 million people hit our website every day. We have a 52nd most visited website on the planet. In Japan, we're actually the 30th. For some reason, we're even more popular over there. 52nd is pretty big when you think about it, right? Because if you think about everything you do on a daily basis, visit your news sites, do your shopping, social media, take all of those out, and all of a sudden we start moving very close to the top of that pile. There are 7 billion people on this planet. And we visit all kinds of different websites. To have us that high is pretty interesting. The other thing about that is that we're so highly visited and we play a fairly big role in software development process, and if GitHub goes down, everybody knows about it. Like we had a fire in the data room in January last year, and we were down for 2 hours and everybody thought the world was ending because GitHub was down. So you're talking about a few releases a month, you talk about a few releases across your entire lifetime. We do 120 releases a day, all right, using this method. All right, the way that we work, and maybe in a future meetup, when I'm back over here again, I can go into more details about how we do this. But we encourage our developers to make small changes, not big changes, continuous improvement, right, which is not a piece of software like continuous integration, it's a philosophy around make small changes, get them out there quickly, measure the feedback that's coming back from the site using tools, things like resource meters and so forth, change things and get them back out there. So we do that 120 times a day. We only have 300 developers worldwide, which compared to Agoda, I now have thousands of developers. Banks I work with have thousands of developers, and we do 120 releases a day. So all our developers are busy. Right, but we can actually track what they do. Good thing about that for us is that, like we're saying, is because of this, when was the last time that GitHub was really down apart from a fire in a data room? There's the odd glitch occasionally where something sleeps through and then we don't realize it until it's into production, and that happens with all kinds of software. But the good thing about it is that this particular flow allows you to experiment, make changes, and all that kind of stuff, and know that by the time you're getting into the point where you're merging code, that you've gone through a proper discussion process, that you've gone through as much of the testing as you possibly can, and you're reasonably confident that you can put your code directly into production. That's not to say that mistakes don't happen, but we have brought it down, we have reduced that risk a considerable amount. The other thing we do around the GitHub flow is because we have all the discussions around the changes that we want to make to code, actually sit with the code themselves. That means if you bring new developers onto your team, so say if my friend here, for example, decides to ramp his project up into a massive commercial project, and all of a sudden he needs 300 developers, by having that pull request open early where people are discussing the changes that you make to your code, it means as you bring on new developers, all you've got to do is to point them into your repository and they can find out why things were written the way they were. If you do it with some other method and you're doing it via email or you're doing it via other kind of mechanisms, sometimes you've got to go and hunt down all those emails and give them to your new developer. That's going to make it really hard for them to come up to speed. So using tools like this, using the GitHub flow, and this sounds like I'm doing a pitch for GitHub, but so many people put up their hands here, I'm just going to say what I say. It allows you to be able to have fast ways to improve your code, the ability to be able to bring new developers on board really quickly, all the conversations around your code are sitting in one place. To the point where we very rarely have status meetings inside of GitHub. People just kind of communicate via issues and pull requests inside GitHub itself. So that's about what the flow is, but let's go and actually have a look at it in practice in GitHub, okay? Oop. Switch to the wrong application. So here we are in GitHub. This is Github Enterprise, which is our on-premise version of GitHub, but everything I'm going to do here tonight applies equally if you use github.com. The reason I use Github Enterprise is just so that we don't have 53 million repositories we need to churn through if we need to search for anything. So this is a repository that we're going to work on tonight for the Bangkok meetup. And you can see, actually I'm in the wrong place, let's just go to here. We can see here that we have our code. Our code consists of one file, a README file, which I created an hour ago when I created this repository before the, before the meetup. There are no open issues. In other words, nobody's reported any bugs or enhancement requests or anything they would like us to work from in my team. Nobody's actually changing these. We've got no pull requests to go through or anything like that. I'll have a look at projects a little bit later and we'll go through some of those things from there. But let's have a look at the GitHub flow and the way it works. So I'm a manager, all right? And as I'm a manager, my job's not to code. I get other people to do that for me. It's sarcasm, by the way. So here are some of our issues. So I've decided that, looking at this README file, it's pretty ordinary, right? All it says is Bangkok meetup. And a good README file. If you have a look at open source software, a good README file tells you how to do things like, how do I download this, the release? How do I install the release? How do I run this code in my own environment? So let's say, I'm looking at this and I'm going, well, if I was doing this as an open source project, this project would probably fail because nobody knows actually how to install my software and use it. So I'm going to get my team to actually work on that a little bit. So I'm going to create a new issue, and we're going to call that issue improve the README file. And then here I've decided that I'm going to basically, describe why I want to make these changes, and I'm not going to say everything I just said then, so I'm going to just put down I think it's a good idea. But normally we'll discuss things like, hey, we should make these changes because, our competitors do it and they do it better than us, or it might be something like, in open source software, successful README files tell you how to actually do things. What I'm going to do is I'm going to put in a couple of tasks for people to do. The first thing I want them to do is create a branch. The next thing I want them to do, and you can see I'm doing some weird typing there, is edit the README file. And yes, I can't spell. You can see why I am a sales engineer and not a developer, because I cannot type. Alright. I sign it off. I usually I sign things with the purple Space Invader and the purple heart, right? Because that signifies me in GitHub. Like I said, purple's my favorite color, so everybody knows that it's me. So I'm going to submit that, and you kind of wonder why I kind of did those weird marks. And what I've basically done, and I'll go back and we'll have a look at those now, by using this particular notation, what happens is our markdown parser, in other words, we use markdown in the text box here. It identifies that as actually a to-do item that you can cross off. If within the actual markdown, if I wanted to edit it and actually say that it's marked off, I just put a little X in there, and when I update the comment, you can see now it's ticked. Wait for that, sorry. You have to forgive me, we're streaming this across half the world and then back up onto that screen, so it's a couple of seconds behind me. You can see that the box is automatically ticked off, or I can go in there manually and untick it. Also, because we've identified it as a to-do list, I can actually change the order. And I'm doing that just from just a simple text file. But it's because the way the text file is formatted using Markdown that we can re-render that on screen. All right, so I'm just going to put that back in the order it should be done. Now, obviously, like I said, I do not want to write this code myself. I want somebody else to write it for me. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to assign it to somebody else in my team. That person being Daniel, which is also me, but we'll get to that in a second. So what I've done is now I've assigned this to Daniel, so at any time I can now come in and track, all the issues that Daniel's been assigned and whether or not he's doing his job and working on them and so forth. I can do things like provide labels to the issue. Labels are a way to kind of classify the issues and pull requests so that you can go through, for example, and quickly list all the enhancement requests that are available in your repository. So I'm just going to pick enhancement because it's a product enhancement. You can create your own labels. They can be any color you want so long as it's purple. And then essentially add these labels to your issues and pull requests to help you classify your issues and pull requests to make it easier to discover things. So if I go back to my list of issues, I can filter it on such things as, is there a bug? Okay, there's no issue that's labeled with a bug. Is there an issue that's labeled with an enhancement request? And I'll just turn off the bug one. Yep, there's one there. All right. So using things like labels, if you've got something like 350 open issues in your repository, just to show you that that kind of does happen, I'm going to go to the source code of GitHub, which sits on GitHub. We can see here at the moment in GitHub, I have 3,513 open issues. Okay, obviously that'd be really, really difficult to be able to go through and look at each one, but if I was interested in all the ones that were labeled bug, and you can see we created our own labels. All right, I can filter that down.
Can I interrupt you?
Yes, sorry.
We just had a question on Facebook that said that the sound's a bit bad, and I think it's because the gain's up too high.
Oh, okay.
So I'm just going to quickly turn down the gain.
Classify the issues and pull Ooh, that's really creaky. Yeah. How does that?
Well, that'll work better. That'll make them happy.
My friend on Facebook who just played that back, can you turn that up again? Somebody was playing audio somewhere? Oh, was it just coming out of there, was it? Okay.
Yeah, keep going now.
Can I keep going now? How's that going? Is that okay? 1, 2.
I can't tell you, I'll find out shortly, but yeah.
Okay, everybody on Facebook, complain now. All right. In the meantime, while all that was happening, you noticed I picked bugs from the label list, and it's now giving me all the ones that are actually a bug. There's only 975 of those open at the moment, so let's label that. Let's kind of narrow that down a little bit more to say, I don't know what font size is, but it's a label that we have in GitHub for our work. And I'll just go in there and pick font size from our list, and I can narrow it down even further to 40 open. So you can see that by using labels, I can do things like start filtering down to individual groups of issues, and also works on the pull request side of things as well. Anyway, back into here. So here's our repository, that's our enhancement. So I've now created the job and I've assigned it to somebody called Daniel. So let's get Daniel to work and get him to come in. So I'm going to switch now quickly to another browser, being Safari. And here I've logged in as Daniel. You can tell it's Daniel because it's actually a picture of me with beard, as opposed to just a picture of me with a beard looking into the camera. And here we have our Bangkok Beat-Up repository. And I go in there and I can see that there's this issue about improving the README file, and I can see, oh, okay, the boss says that I need to go and do this work. That's kind of okay, so I'm just going to say, yes, I'm on it. And I also sign things with a purple heart. Oh, I can't come in at this time. Oh, don't tell me my network is down. Let's go, yep, cool, awesome. So now I've just said, okay, I'm working on this now, everything's okay. So let's go and have a look at our source code. So this is the README file that my boss wants me to improve. So I'm just going to click on the file so we're looking at it in its own page. And I'm going to click on the edit file. So I can now edit this in browser, but there's nothing stopping me from cloning this to my desktop, to my laptop, using my favorite, Visual Studio just to edit this text file or whatever it happens to be to use. But for this, I'm just going to do it all in the browser. So let's make some changes here. I'm going to use some markup like use a heading. So I'm going to use a level 2 heading. And essentially say, this is a great, I can't type. We're going to leave that spelling error there because we're going to refer to it later on. You can see if I click on preview changes, because it's markdown, we'd use 2 hashes. And we can see one that gives me an idea of what I've changed, and also that the heading size is slightly smaller than that heading one we had before. I could change that to a heading 3, smaller again. I can add things like italics. I can add bold. Sorry, it's 2 for bold. And you can see we've done some smarts. So we even identify that you're editing a markdown file, and we actually will bold that text. We'll italicize that text. So Markdown's a really great way to format your Markdown. Markdown's a really good way to format things like documentation. It's great for doing things like formatting comments and codes and issues and pull requests and so forth. If I go a lot, I apologize. I've been talking all day since about 8 o'clock this morning, and I'll be going for a while yet. Okay, so what I want to do now is I've made the changes. Let's pretend that I've added all that README about how do I install the software, how do I get it running, what's the idea of this project, what's the vision. We're just going to say that's all highlighted just there, and we're going to go and save it. Now it's really interesting. You can see now that it says I can't commit directly to the master branch. My administrator has been very smart. He's turned around and turned on what we call protected branches to actually stop people from writing code directly to the branch unless it's gone through the approval process. So if I go and try and say, oh, I can't, so it won't let me, all right? And that's not just because I've got a dodgy trackpad. But what I do have the option to do is create a new branch automatically and start a pull request. Right? And you see how we actually encourage people when you do something like this, that we actually go back in and start that pull request straight away. So I'm going to call it the branch something a little bit more useful, like improve. And I don't do 120 releases a day because I cannot type. I'm going to commit those changes. So now I've actually committed those changes, and it's taken me directly to the open a pull request screen. What I'm going to do here is something a little bit more interesting. Again, I can use Markdown to do things like refer to images on the web, drag and drop files into this interface. They are stored within GitHub, and then there are links created to them here. But all I'm going to do in this kind of case is I'm just going to type fixes, and I'm going to refer to our issue. And you notice that when I type the hash key or the pound key, depending on what country you're from, it's the same two-line like a noughts and crosses board. You can see it starts searching for all the issues that I've currently got existing. So I'm going to select number 1, improve the README file, and hit return. I'm just going to zoom in a little bit here. Yep, that catches up fine. And if I click on the preview button, you can see that again, because we look at the actual text file, that hash1 has now been rendered as a link directly to the issue. So if I open that link in a new tab, it takes me directly to the issue that we want to fix. And while I'm there, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to tick the box to say I've done those things to keep my boss happy. All right. I'm now going to create the pull request. At this point in time, I'm basically telling the world that I've made changes to my software, and I really want to discuss those changes that have been made. I go down, and those of you who are familiar with GitHub can kind of go, we could probably merge that stuff now. But you can see I can't actually do that. I haven't got permission to merge it. I'm not authorized to merge the pull request. All right? So in other words, again, we've put something in play here to make sure only the right people can merge code into that master branch. 2 things that are required. Firstly, somebody has to review my changes and go, yep, they're okay. And also, we're currently blocked. We won't allow people to actually merge until that review has taken place. But in my particular case, because I'm not an administrator, then we've also blocked non-administrative people from being able to merge code. The other thing you'll notice, and it's probably a little bit hard to show in the overhead projector, I'm really sorry about this, it's a little bit washed out, is you can see that there's a little bit of a line underneath the fixes. Can you see that dotted line? It's really, really faint. If I hover over that word, you can see that we've identified that this pull request will close issue number 1. If you use certain language within your Markdown when you're opening like a pull request message, it's closes, fixes, and a few other words, we'll actually identify it. And what will happen is when we actually merge this code and close this pull request, it'll automatically go in and close the issue as well, because everything is complete. We don't have to go any further. At the moment, we can't do this. We can't do this because no one's reviewed the code. All right. So I'm going to just switch back now to Google Chrome into the other account that we've got logged in, and I'm going to have a look at the pull request that we have open, and I'm going to look at the update README. And you can see how I can see, oh great, okay, that's great, that fixes number 1, that's really important. I want to make sure that that issue is closed. I'm going to go and have a look, and it says, okay, review required. I need to review the code, so let's go and do that. I'm going to go add my review, and I'm looking at this, and here is a list of the changes to this particular file. And you can see that red represents what's come out, and green represents what's come in. And straight away I notice there's some things about this I don't like. Firstly, there is a spelling error. So I can just click on the little plus button here and go, hey, can you please spell this correctly? And this seems a little bit kind of simple, what we're doing here, but the idea being is I don't want to be writing lots of lines of code and having to try and figure out what the code's doing. I'm trying to actually, and see, look, I can't even spell there. The idea being is that we're going through the process here more than anything else. Now, I can add just a single comment, and Daniel can log in and have a look at this, but we're actually going to start a review process. So click on Start Review, and I can go through and go to the Review Changes button now. And there are 3 things I can do to actually provide my review of the code. If I just leave it as comment, I haven't approved it, but I haven't told them to make any changes. if I approve this and click on the approve button and then click on submit approve, what will then happen is I have noted that I've approved the code, and then somebody will actually be able to merge that code into the master branch. I don't want to do that. I'm going to request changes. So basically I'm saying here, I don't approve of this. We need to make this fix. So let's do that and click on the submit review button. So you can see now that the status has changed from review required through to the fact now that changes are requested. So what we're doing is we're tracking the conversation that's going on within GitHub itself, and it's sitting there with the code. For example, here are the changes I've just requested, saying, hey, can you please spell this correctly? And it even labels me as the owner of the repository. So Daniel kind of goes, ooh, I'm under pressure here. I probably need to get that job done. So let's just swap back out now. And I'm just going to reload this page. So here we are in the pull request. I'm back into being Daniel again. And you can see that there's been a request from my boss basically saying, hey, can I please spell the word this correctly? So I'm going to go through and do that now. So go back to our code. And I'll make sure that I'm in the branch that we're working on, the improve the README branch. I'm going to go edit the file. I'm going to go fix that spelling mistake. Scroll down. This time round, I'm still in the improve the README branch, so I'm allowed to commit directly to that branch, so I'll do that. Now, I didn't add a commit message there. That's really bad from a developer point of view, but we have a default value that said update the README file. I'm going to go back into my pull request now, and we'll have a look at the update README file. And we can see that we still have a history of the change. So you can see now that I've made a change since it's been requested from me, and I did that update file, and I can go in and have a look at this, and I can go and have a look at the changes that have been actually made in that particular patch. So I've gone from TGIS to THIS. So I've made my changes and I'm kind of happy. So what I'm going to do now, excuse me, it's just going to go in. I'm going to say to my boss, look, I've done these changes. Can you please do some work on it? Now what I'm going to do here is I'm actually going to call what's called @mentioning my boss. You've probably done this on Twitter, for those of you who remember Twitter. If you go @ and my boss's name, you can see I can pick him from the list and add him to the process. I have done this, please review. Sign it, and away we go. So I've just added that comment, and we're just taking that conversation around the software and the changes in the software, and it's sitting there in place. I'm going to hop back in now, go back into Chrome, and I can now see that, oh, that's really good. Daniel's gone in and made those changes and letting me know. The other thing you'll notice is, see how now that's because we @mentioned somebody by using the @ symbol. Again, we've done some smart parsing of the text that's been written there. And that gives me now a link where I can do things like look at Afray's profile. Look, all right. So that's me, or that's Afray. They're all the repositories that Afray's been working on. We do things like classify the repositories based on the language they use and so forth. But you can see by using things like Markdown that you can actually get some really rich interactions happening within GitHub itself. So I really suggest that as you type things in comments and discussions within issues and pull requests, use Markdown to enhance that experience, do things like be able to close issues automatically and so forth. Let's have a look at that now. And I'm going to have a look at this. I'm going to have a look at the changes that have been made. Actually, I think I clicked the wrong thing then. I did click the wrong thing now, so I've just automatically approved it without looking at the code, but that's okay. I've approved that now. We can see that changes have been approved. We've got no conflicts with the base branch because nobody's actually changed it in the meantime, so I now have the capability as an administrator to merge this. Just quickly going back into Safari and the developer login, Daniel, you can see that everything's been approved, but he doesn't have permission to merge that code. So you can do things like make sure that only certain people can merge code in your repository. Again, this helps to make sure that you're getting good quality, clean code out there into production. All right, so let's go and merge that. So you can still see here, just up here quickly, we have our single, oops, we have our issue, all right, our one issue that's still there that's open. I'm just showing that number there. If I go down now and actually merge the pull request, maybe put in an additional message that basically describes the merge, but I'm just going to quickly merge it now. So that's merged, and now that's merged, I can do things like I can choose to delete the I can choose to delete the feature branch I was just working on, or I could keep it around forever. I'm going to keep it around forever. If we go back into our issues list now, we can see that we no longer actually have an open issue. That issue that was open only a few moments ago has been automatically closed, and that's because we detected from the fixes number 1 inside that pull request message. We've detected that. We've gone, okay, we'll track this, so if this pull request is approved, merged, and closed, we'll just go ahead and close the issue as well. So that's the GitHub flow. Does anyone have any questions around that?
When you delete a branch, will it be gone eventually, or it will still be there forever?
It won't be there. When you delete a branch, we keep it for about 30 days, and then we purge it totally and utterly. So an administrator has the capability to restore a deleted branch for about 30 days, I think it is, after you delete it. We're looking at how you can actually change that number, but right now it's a set value. So we do keep branches around for a while. So let's go and have a look at our code. You can see we got the 2 branches, and I'm logged in as an administrator here. So you can see here that we've got our active branch here, our default branch, right? And this is the branch that we've just been working on. That's why it's still regarded as an active branch. After a few days, it would slip out of that list and go to another list, it's basically called branches. So I'm going to delete that branch. You can see it tracks that it's deleted by now. If I reload that, ooh, I've just lost that. Oops. Oh, you know why? Because it's not active. Oh, we've changed it. I've been caught out a little bit. Well, there you go. It disappears straight away now. That might be a setting that I've actually set in this particular installation of GitHub. Sorry about that. All right. So that is just looking at the GitHub flow in general. At the same time, we've looked at issues. We've looked at how you can work with Markdown a little bit. To do things that are just smarter than just making text italic or text bold, we've done things like done checklists so that people can tick tasks off as they do things. We've done things like by mentioning in a pull request message that it fixes a particular issue, that when we close and merge the pull request, it automatically goes off and closes the actual relevant issue as well from there on in. Okie dokie, so it's about 8 o'clock at the moment. Is everybody going okay? Do we want to keep going at this point? I think pizza is going to be kind of turning up soon. What else do I want to talk about? Let's have a talk about projects for a little bit. Has anyone here ever used a product called Trello? Trello? Yeah, cool. It's a great product, isn't it? It's really, really good. So what we've got in GitHub is we've got a feature called projects, and it's very similar in terms of the way that the programs like Trello work. They're all based around the concept of what's called a Kanban board, which is a really strange name. I don't know where it actually comes from myself, but the best way to think about it is Post-it notes on a whiteboard. All right, so let's go and have a look at create a project and have a look at what that looks like here. So this is my super project. And what we're doing here is it kind of gives you the ability to start grouping issues and pull requests based on where they may be in a particular development cycle. A project consists of several columns. You can name these columns and have them be anything you want. So I'm going to just add our first column. I'm going to call it incoming. And while that's sitting there, I'm going to add another column called, I don't know, triage. Add another column called working on, in progress. And another one will say complete. And you can have lots of columns. It's just a matter of scrolling across. It's just a matter of scrolling across, like I said before. I just scrolled back a little bit too far and went to the previous page. You can always rename a column if you need to, or delete a column. You can shift columns around if you need to shift them around so they represent a decent logical order in the projects that you're working on. There's a little menu here where you can start looking at things like activity that happens within the actual project. So you can see here that everything from creating the project about a minute ago to creating all of our columns to moving the columns around is all tracked. So you can actually look at the history of what happens within the project itself. But it's kind of a bit boring right now. It's a bit boring because there's nothing there to actually track. Now there's a few things you can do at that point in time. If you've got any issues or pull requests, by clicking on the Add Cards button, you can actually bring those into the project. Now these ones are already completed, so I'm just going to drag them across here, close that there, and just drag them across to our complete area. So we pretend that we had those in play all along and they're in our project and things are now complete. But we may have ideas for a new feature for our project. I don't have to go into issues and open the issue. I can actually do something like maybe enter a little note here, like how about we add more instructions for the README. You can add that note. Maybe another idea we might want to do at some stage, but we don't want to turn it into an issue or a feature request right now, might be to do something like, let's tell the world about our product on Twitter. See, like I am terrible. Let's tell the world about our product on Twitter. That's why I don't write code. Add note, and so forth. So you can add notes. Notes are just areas where you can collect ideas, for example, into your project. When you're actually ready to work on them, you don't need to go now and go into the issue spot and actually create an issue from there. I can just go to this little pop-up and I can convert it to an issue. I can add a little bit of markdown here, convert it to an issue. And you can see now that the view of it's changed a little bit. Instead of just being a note, with some text that I can't really, click on a link, it's now become an issue with a link. We've now created an issue and we're tracking it within the project directly. It's now been assigned issue number 3, and if I click on it, it takes me directly to that issue within the repository itself. Assuming my network works, there we go. All right, it didn't even do the markdown very well there. Isn't that terrible? Okay, so by using projects, you can start gathering ideas. Just drop them into notes, for example, into your first column, and then and then have them basically be tracked through your project. And I need to move that back. I must have accidentally slipped it over. Now, obviously, you can then do things like track what's happening within that particular project, about what's happening with those issues. So for example, if somebody said, well, I'm going to assign it myself and start working on it, then you can move it across to, in progress. And then finally, maybe when, there's been a pull request open, we've gone through our GitHub flow, we've gone through our conversations, and finally we're happy, we may close that image, and then we can drag it across to the complete column. And that's all projects really are. And if you notice, it's just like dragging post-it notes and moving them from one column to another. And it's amazing how much software development has been done just by literally having post-it notes on a whiteboard in columns. These columns can be anything you want. You can have quite a few number of columns and so forth. If I go and have a look at, again, our activity, you can see that we've actually got a track. We've actually tracked about how all of those issues have run through our development process and how things have changed over time. Does anyone have any questions around projects? No? Wow, this is going to be a quick night, isn't it? Alrighty then. Let's have a talk about something else, what we can have a look at now. Does anyone actually use wikis at all within GitHub? No? No? Okay, alright. Wikis are kind of a cool way that allow you to kind of like start creating documentation if you don't want to create your documentation in a repository. We create our documentation in a repository. Other organizations just like to have a wiki to collect information. So wikis kind of allow you to do things such as build a simple site. It might be instructions for people on how to download and run the application. It may be a knowledge base that you might build to help people actually work with your application and so forth. Again, you can either use you can use various types of markup type code to be actually able to create the pages in your wiki. We default to Markdown because that's the only one I really know. But you can see I can do things like, okay, well this is a heading 1, so I click on heading 1 and it starts formatting the code or formatting the page exactly the way I want. So eventually I might know that this is a second level heading. Or if I didn't know that and I just wanted a third level heading, I spelled that correctly. I can click on, oops, at the beginning of the line. Just go to the beginning of the line, click on H3 and we'll insert the appropriate Markdown code that allows me to build that. So if I preview this page now, you can see that we're getting our headings, we're getting our formatting in ways that we would like. You can see if I wish to do things like have a link to a particular website, if I click on the link button, it says, okay, what do you want the link text to be? It might be, let's have a link to GitHub. And the URL happens to be, I know from experience, github.com. I click on OK. You notice if I do the preview again, it renders that as a link, and if I click on that link, it'll take me through to GitHub itself. But the good thing about Markdown, like I said before, is it should be readable in this format, that you actually understand that what we're talking about here is a link to the website called GitHub, but it's actually still readable. This is a third level heading, it's still readable as that. You're not having to look inside HTML code and all that kind of stuff to read the plain text. I can even do things like deal with images. So the images have their own format as well. I don't have an image that I can think of right now as a URL, but basically put the URL to an image that you discover on the web, some alternate text for people who use a text renderer, for example, for their web browsers, and we'll actually go and render that image within this particular web page. I can do things like bullet points. I can have numbered lists. Oops. Now it's interesting there, you notice it just has one for each particular one, but again, if I click on preview, it'll actually render it as a numbered list. The reason why we do it that way is that Markdown is designed to be rendered, and you can render as HTML, but you can use your own CSS to render it any way you want. So you may want it so that all lists are indented, for example, or that then becomes a function of your renderer, not of the Markdown in itself. So here's my page. It's the first page. I'll say, welcome to the wiki. Oops. Save that page. And I've started to create a wiki. I've started to create a knowledge base. So here we have our home page, and here we have our welcome to the wiki page, and I can keep editing new pages and add them to the column and so forth. You can add custom sidebars that allow you to do things like, I don't know, anything that you can basically format into the page. You can have there sitting inside a custom sidebar, so you could have information, for example, about when the next meetup might be for the group, user group, or anything like that along those lines. So, you know, wiki, it's a very simple wiki. It's, again, not designed to replace something like Confluence or anything like that, but if you want a quick way to just build some lightweight pages to share information with maybe your developers or the users of your code, then wiki is a really good way to get started. If you look at some of the open source projects on GitHub, often they'll do things like they'll allow users to provide how they use my particular project in interesting ways. Any questions about wikis or anything like that? Yes, sir.
I did see that you supported restructured text. So is it possible to point the wiki to a folder in the source code and render it as a wiki? Let's say we've got lots of documentation in restructured text.
Yeah.
It would be nice to show that as a wiki.
Oh, yeah.
On GitHub. So is it possible to make that?
It's not possible to do that at the moment, but I know we're looking at some things around those lines, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Any other, I've got to make sure I'm looking around the corner, my friends. Yes?
How did you get a different ID?
Sorry, can you speak up a lot? I cannot hear you from down there.
Yeah, you get a AWS URL over there, right?
Yep.
So how do you get that? I think it's different from GitHub.com.
Oh, okay, so what I'm running here is Github Enterprise. Github Enterprise is the on-premise version of GitHub.com. That's what Agoda are using. You're using, Github Enterprise as well. That's why it has an AWS entry, because I actually deployed a copy of this inside of Amazon Web Services which is why that happens to be. This is github.com. Right? You can tell the difference because it just has the Octocat logo there, whereas GitHub Enterprise has Octocat Enterprise sitting there. Right? GitHub Enterprise and GitHub.com are exactly the same product in the way they work. It's just that we have some customers who, for certain reasons, can't keep their source code outside of the country. The source code that you store in GitHub.com at the moment is currently stored in the United States of America. Sorry? Yes, really. We don't have distributed networks across the world or anything like that at the moment. However, you might have organisations like banks, for example, who, for regulatory reasons, are not allowed to keep their source code outside the country of residence, right? So they often come to us and they purchase an on-premise copy of GitHub, which we call GitHub Enterprise. They can deploy it in the data center of their choosing. So they may have their own data centers where they're running something like VMware or Hyper-V or KVM or one of several other several other virtual machine systems, or they can deploy in environments like AWS, Azure, or Google Compute. We basically supply a virtual image that they can deploy there. So it takes about 5 minutes to set up and it's running. And that's the reason why if I go to the homepage, for example, for Enterprise, and I start, then I'm just going to go to my own dashboard here. If I search GitHub for something like Bootstrap, I'm not going to find it here, right? Because this is GitHub Enterprise. This is not the big version GitHub.com. If I go to GitHub.com, and I'm logged in there, and this time I'm going to search for Bootstrap. This time around I'm going to find something, all right? There's 110,000 repositories that have something to do with the term Bootstrap, including the official one, as in the HTML, CSS, JavaScript framework that a lot of people use. A lot of people have done things like fork this particular framework, and so they're adding additional features to it, and then they can submit those changes back as pull requests to the system. Joel's eating pizza, which means no pizza's here or anything like that. How about we have a bit of a 10-minute break so I can grab some water and get some food into people? How's that sound? Yep, cool. All right, let's have a break. Shall I pause this?
I'll just stop it. Yeah.
Stop the stream?
Yep, no, I'll stop it from here.
Oh, okay.
And then stop the recording from there.
Stop the recording, we'll have a part two.